This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Kvod Harabunim, thank you for coming here. We know that it's in the best interest of parents with challenging children not to be strict with them, not to be controlling, and not to be imposing. Does this rule apply, and is it in the best interest of the parents and the children without a limit? Is there a limit, and when? Thank you for answering.
I'll have something to So the Emma says this is the $1 million question. Where can we say no? When should we say no? We all wish, and before, all of us, before coming round and realizing the situation, we were saying no to all the things our parents said no to us about, and that's obviously not working. We tried to say no. We're only in this place now because we said no all those times that our parents said no to us, and it didn't work. So we know that we have to stop saying no. The question is, what's the limit? That's the question. And I once heard from a big Pikeach who told me, in the name of Rabbi Pinchas Jung, most questions you get asked in life, instead of answering the ma, try and answer the lama. Instead of giving the answer to the what, try and understand why. So when a parent comes forward and says, should I say no? The first question we're going to ask the parent is, what would want to make you say no? Why do you want to say no? What's your agenda? What are you trying to achieve? And then if the parent says, I want to say no because I think that because there are more rights in Yeridea, that there's an issa of Messiah Lidei Evra Avera, and if I don't say no, I'm going to be called a Messiah. Well, that's a very clear halachic question, and the halachas of Messiah are not so clear at all, but it's a Sif and Shulchan Aruch in Yeridea, and you can learn that. Is it Messiah? Is it not Messiah? If he says, I've got a chiyuv of Teichacha, we have to learn Hilchas Teichacha. Even before going into what's different with this child to every child, let's learn the question for what it is. You want Teichacha? Is it Teichacha? Chanoich lenar al pidarkoi. Some people think chinuch means say no. Well, it might mean say no, but let's learn what chinuch is. These are very clearly defined in Torah. And if the parents say, well, he's going to commit suicide, and I'm scared he's going to die, well, that's a pikuach nefesh shaila, which is very clearly defined in Shulchan Aruch, that everything gets pushed away for pikuach nefesh, even any fancy mahalach in chinuch. Any fancy ideas we may have to save our kids, with all the records of saving them, if he wants to kill himself, pikuach nefesh is deicha kol ha'teira kula, and we put everything aside and we save him. So the big question is, why would you want to say no? And when we can answer that, then we've compartmentalized it. It's become very clear. You want to know if there's any rules? Any rules? Any rules? I could answer you something.
Maybe I may add that before we get to Rav Lobenstein's next point, sometimes people are tempted to say no because they would be embarrassed to be seen with a boy dressed this way or a girl dressed this way. Now, that is not with the child's development being their top interest. So we have to be very, very honest when we ask ourselves, why do we say no? Too often, for the uninitiated and parents who are new in this situation, and we're not condemning them, but we're trying to guide them, it's going to be a priority to consider the welfare and development of the young one, and I'm afraid your own cheshbonos is secondary. And very often people are motivated by was past famir, what they feel is lefi erkom, because they could be very fine, choshev, upstanding, Torah de gemishpocha. So that's one point I thought might be relevant here.
Yeah, so that's like Rav Jung said, that very often and in most cases the emotional triggers of the parents is what's driving them. Many parents, when this whole sugya of the challenged teenager, it's arousing in them feelings of failure, feelings of rejection. Every time this child comes into the house looking like, I don't know what, like Odom Rishon Koydem Achet, instead of seeing pity for the child, what they're seeing a big banner holding up saying, you parents, you failed as parents, you failed as mechanchim, you failed as being good Jews, whatever the banner says in the parent's mind, and that's triggering them to say, I have to stop this. And then, is there anything wrong with parents feeling failure and feeling shame? No, it's human, it's normal. Oy vavoy if you're totally okay with the situation. That would be very bad news. But, so are you allowed to protect your own kavod? Of course, but at what expense? If it's not going to cost you much, that means if the child is going to conform because the child just didn't realize that walking around with yellow hair is embarrassing, and just reminding him that it's embarrassing you, he's going to say, no problem, I'll change it. Of course you can do that. But if the child's going to say that my parents, they don't get it, they're not on my page, they think it's all about the color of the hair, as if it says in Torah anywhere that you have to have black or white hair, v'chulu v'chulu, then the calculation is wrong. Because you're trying to, like Rav Jung said, that you're upholding your own kavod, but it's costing you your child. You're distancing your child, you're sending him away. It's not kedai, it's not worth it, it's a bad investment.
I'd like to comment, if I may, on what Rav Lobenstein said about failure. Because we tend to think, when we have a challenge, that we are failing. But that maybe needs to be redefined. Who said that a parent who is ehrlich, who's trying their best, and despite it all, their child has chosen a different path in life, who said that they failed? Maybe it's a nisoyan like any other. We have all sorts of nisoyans in life, financial nisoyanas, health nisoyanas, family nisoyanas, communal nisoyanas, and in none of these cases is it clear at all that we have failed. In fact, from knowing a bit of the current world of therapy, of psychology, one of the things that people are tempted to do when they're struggling is to put themselves down. And that actually is counterproductive. So if a parent is going to say to themselves, well, look, I'm looking at my Shoshana and judging what I'm seeing, I've failed, it's not at all mukhrach. It's not at all mukhrach. It could be because we are so close to the time of Geula Yetz Hashem. It is a nisoyan how they will handle it. It's not necessarily at all an indicator that they did it wrong. They may have done. I'm not saying they may have done, but it does not prove it by any stretch of the imagination. And they have to be mechazik themselves maybe by saying, I tried my best, and Hashem, for reasons I don't understand, gave it to me this way. So let's see now, in the matzav as it is, what's the best that we can do.
I just want to add that Chalila v'chas, I wasn't suggesting that parents going through this, they are to blame, they are failures. I've written sforim on this topic and given shiurim on this topic. Chas v'shalom, most parents, our whole job is to empower the parents and show them that they are not failures and they are not reject chas v'shalom. I was just bringing out that even in the event that a parent is doing it in order to uphold these emotions, make sure that you're getting the balance right. But chas v'shalom, I'm not suggesting that that's the case in most cases.
If I may add also, earlier on, I think Rav Lobenstein mentioned it varies from child to child. I do have a girl who comes to see me, although I'm largely retired nowadays, but she comes to see me, and I was gratified when on her last visit she told me, you told me on the previous visit, if I try this, it's not going to make me happy. And so I'm not going to try it. In other words, it was something new to her. This would not apply to most of the kids that are being dealt with by the parents who we meet here today. But I'm just saying, when a child is on the level that they're willing to hear and absorb the message that what might make you happy and what very likely will make you unhappy, although they, at this point in time, that they feel this is going to solve my problem, this is going to make me happy. An example is drugs. An example is mixed gender activities, etc. But actually, we know they bring more heartache than anything else. Now, if I do have a bit of experience, it is with girls, and my daughter, who helped me often with this work, would say, oh, we haven't heard from Michal from a long time. You know what, I'm sure she's broken up with her boyfriend and she's embarrassed to come forward. In other words, when she needs us the most, then she doesn't come. So there are those who are still on the madrega, like this one who came to me recently, that if they hear an akudah like this, no, it's not going to do it for you. It's not going to solve your problem. It's not going to make you happier. Again, most of the kids, I do believe, who we are thinking of at this convention are not in that category anymore. But if they would be, then such an observation is worth sharing with them. It can make them think. And I said to her, I said, Goldie, listen, you still come. You could so easily do all this stuff without coming to ask. So if you're still coming, it shows your level of Yerushalayim, your level of Ehrlichkeit, and your level of being prepared to be Mekabel. So if somebody is prepared to be Mekabel, it's quite a different story. But I think that the basic original Shala was not that.
That's part of the answer. What if it works for the child?
Right. And those who've been through the trauma of abuse, very often it is so profound, the pain, that it's not going to help. So then I think what Rav Lobenstein said, when it crosses the red line of Pikuach Nefesh, then we only have one option, which is to step in.
Another question. There are times when people who aren't very familiar with halacha have questions whether to alter the policies in the house, benegei chumras and halachas. Can you give a guide on what people should be asking about, what they shouldn't have to ask about? What are things that people have to give noch in order to accommodate one child, even though the entire house is going to accept now a killa, or let's give an example, Pas Yisrael or Chalav Yisrael. And in some houses, they watch over this, and they do not eat Pas Yisrael, or they're careful about Chalav Yisrael, but there's a child that we have to accommodate them and at least bring it in for him, but it's sort of going to show in the house that there is an acceptance of it. Other halachas in Pesach, for example, and how do people decide what they have to ask and what is something that is okay to do when it comes to making one person happy in the house for the benefits that we all know we have to go ahead with?
Okay. Not long ago, somebody asked me about OU, because the family was looking for, should we say, a different standard of kashrus. And who am I to criticize OU? I have no right to, and have no intention to. But we do know that we, as a rule, try to go for hechsherim from our own type of communities, right? But this girl herself said, no, not OUD. Not OUD, that she's not asking about, but she's asking about OU. So rightly or wrongly, I said to her, listen, I cannot stand up and say that OU is not kosher. What right do I have to say that? It would require an extensive amount of research to really give the ultimate answer. So maybe, if you think about it, why should you not go for a better hechsher? But on the other hand, if you're going to be determined to eat OU, it's a lot better than eating stuff that has no hechsher whatsoever. And if you are able to keep to the rule that not dairy, not OUD, then that is something. There's always the question, and I'm sure it's been dealt with in Rabbi Fischhoff's original program, and this is a very delicate question, the other kids in the house. And what he has written, I've read in some of his material, and which makes a lot of sense. You're not dealing with a rebellious Yaakov, you're dealing with a rebellious Esav, you're dealing with a sick Yaakov. In other words, you're dealing with a kid who's basically a good kid, but they're in profound pain. Why? Mentioned in passing one or two of the possible reasons, but there are others as well. So if the other kids, in the nicest possible way, can understand that, like they would understand that any child suffering chas v'sholem from a physical illness, special provisions have to be made, so too emotional illness is just as serious, if not more, and therefore provisions have to be made. Now, the type of thing that you mentioned, Reb Heinach, doesn't seem to be the most serious of things. And chumras, I was telling one of them not long ago, we're not looking for chumras. Chumras, no. The thing is that you probably will not have the amount of knowledge necessary to know what's a chumrah, what's a halacha. Us men often are struggling to remember the various shittas, various dayas, and what is a chumrah and what is halacha. It's not such a black and white thing, right? Not at all. I think what she meant by chumras was things that our family keep to. And halacha would be, to her understanding, a standard a drop below that, and then I'd be the black sheep, I'd be the odd one out. So it gets down to subtleties very often. And one would, in a way, have to, as you said yourself, Rav Lobenstein, one would have to get a bit of a picture of the family and also a good understanding of what the issue is at stake. I want to say just this one added point. Like a good doctor doesn't just treat the particular part of the patient's body that is causing the pain, but looks at the whole picture. In these things we have to do the same. We have to do the same thing. And we have to be good listeners, and we have to understand the matzav arim and arim, not just the specific, could-be technical question. And so when they're talking in terms of chumras, so we got to know what they really, really mean. And what is a chumrah and what is a halacha? What is your family about? How do you get on with your parents? With which of the two are you closer? And a bunch of other questions. Not because we want to interrogate them, but we want to understand enough to give the right answer.
Yeah. Okay, so there's mamish not a lot to be meisif. And like I said before, the first question should really be, why? Who are you trying to protect? Are you trying to protect yourself? Are you trying to protect the other people in the house? Are you trying to protect this child himself? And it's a huge difference. If you're trying to protect this child, well, then it's not really halacha shayla per se. It's, am I supposed to now control this child? Am I supposed to say, is this supposed to be one of the no's that we discussed before? If it's like what they're going to bring in, they're going to lower the standards in the home, it's another shayla. There was a story with a man who was seriously ill, and the doctor said he has to eat on Yom Kippur. And so they came, they brought him food, and he said, I'm not eating on Yom Kippur. So the son of this man said, it's not Yom Kippur today, Yom Kippur is tomorrow. So this ill person said to the son, let me see, so you eat. If you eat, I'll know it's not Yom Kippur, and then I can eat as well. Is the son allowed to eat on Yom Kippur? So we're not going to answer that question now. But it's something which, it's not clear at all that he doesn't need to eat on Yom Kippur. Because if my eating on Yom Kippur is going to save his life, then it could be that's what I'm supposed to do. I had a story with somebody who called me up and said they wanted their child, that they're trying to be Makarev, wants a particular type of chocolate, milky chocolate, and that hechsher was below the standard of the family. And I told the family you should buy it for them, and when the child brings it out to the Shabbos table, I said the father should eat. I said the other kids should be told in advance, explain it to them, they could get away with it. But I told the father you should eat. I said, Duat Toras Nadorim, we can't, it's not for a lengthy discussion now, but it could be, there's a shayla of, if you've taken on a certain chumrah, then you've got to be careful with the Toras Nadorim. But make a Toras Nadorim and eat that chocolate just this once, because that's what your child needs. It wasn't treif, it was a chumrah. It was a chumrah. So always we have to ask the why and then weigh up. Weigh up.
I'd like to add just a little story with the Chazonish Zatzal, because that's a great hadrocha in these inyonim, and that is he visited on Erev Yom Kippur somebody who was unfortunately sick and could not fast, and he said, I get an Erev Yontif and we're both doing Rotzen Hashem. I am able to fast, so I will fast. That's Rotzen Hashem, that's straightforward. You are not in a matzav right now that you can safely fast. So in order to preserve your life, you not only are going to eat, but you must eat. Like the famous story of Yisrael Salanta Zatzal, who got up on the bima when there was a different kind of pandemic, it was cholera, wasn't it? And he made Kiddush on Yom Kippur, right, in public, right? Yeah, so such a godel. And we have to understand that the Rotzen Hashem is not a black and white thing. It depends on a person and their circumstances. So likewise, one could definitely also make distinctions between different children in the family as long as the others are sensible and mature enough to understand that it's not one size fits all. That we cannot change the Torah chas v'sholem chalila v'chalila, but it's not a one size fits all textbook.
Yeah. We find by Avraham Avinu where the Malachim came and they had to fake it to make it. Sometimes in life, if the environment is mechayev that you have to eat and you don't want to eat, then you have to pretend to eat. The Malachim could have come and said they don't want to eat. They pretended to eat because that's what they had to do. In last year, for those who were here, but the last convention, we discussed at length the difference between being a Jew, between Judaism and the Jewish culture. And it's I don't know if the people here were there last time, but it's so fundamentally important that we understand that who we are. I am a Yid. I'm a Yid irrespective of what I'm doing. Keeping Torah that's Yiddishkeit, but that's halacha. And there's lots of things which was just a culture. It's like wearing black and white. Even just wearing a couple bichlal, according to many poskim, is a culture. It's one that was accepted. And somebody who doesn't do it, then it's a worrying sign because they're rejecting the culture. But he hasn't rejected Yiddishkeit. So when it comes to hechsherim, we have to realize that, we all, in this kehillah, we all eat a certain hechsher, we all don't eat a certain hechsher. You have to realize, what is that? Is that making me or not making me into a Yid? Is it Yiddishkeit or is it a culture? And as they say, don't throw out the baby with how does it go?
Bathwater.
With the bathwater. It's like, just because you have to be mevata on the culture doesn't mean you've been mevata on the Yiddishkeit. And so many of our teenagers, it's nothing to do with this question per se, but so many of these teenagers, they getting rid of, I had a kid who was over on kol ha'torah kula. And I asked him, what triggered you? What was going on? What's the story? There's not a single avera he didn't do. So he says to me, I couldn't do this Yiddishkeit. I couldn't do it. So I said, what part of Yiddishkeit couldn't you do? So he says to me, I couldn't wait more than 5 hours for my coffee. And in his mind, waiting 5 hours, not waiting the whole 6th hour, that means I'm a goy. So I don't need to eat. I don't need to fast on Yom Kippur, and I don't need to keep Shabbos, and I don't need to keep tznias and gornished. When I explained to him, according to many poskim, the Rambam says you wait 5 hours and a minute is enough. According to many yekkers, they wait 3 hours l'katchila. If you're lucky enough to be born in Holland, you wait 1 hour. Whatever it is, so they've taken a culture. It's true that it's a culture that found its way into the Shulchan Aruch, and the Shach says that Yirei Shamayim should try and be machmir, but they've taken something which is being portrayed as this is Yiddishkeit, and no, this is not Yiddishkeit. It's very important, but is it Yiddishkeit? If you've got a child who's struggling and he's waiting just an hour after meat, no, don't say anything to him. It's really the wrong thing to say anything about. So it's very important that we keep track and keep focus of what's real here.
And in that context, if I may add again, the white shirt and the black hat, all that, it's not halacha, it's not to be moise nefesh, and it's not that we should in any way look differently at such an individual. And as you all know, there are some people who've got mamish, a heart of gold and a devotion to Hashem Yisborach, despite that. I'd like to add something, I think, which would definitely be agreed by everybody, because the Chazal, Keshem mitzvah loy medova nishmo, kach mitzvah sheloi loy medova sheloi nishmo. So I said to somebody on one occasion, okay, you know what, the best thing now is to say nothing. So go and wash your hands, put on your gartel, say L'Shem Yichud, and then I'm not going to say anything. Because the truth is we've got to be Royas HaNoilad. I think this is really one of the asaidas that we haven't maybe expressed openly, but to be Royas HaNoilad, if I am going to insist or even make an issue of it, let's just think ahead what's going to be the outcome. Is that going to be a gain or a loss? Now, in a lot of the situations, it's going to be a loss. Especially if the kids are in pain and we do not realize how profound the pain is. And that's why Avi quite rightly kips. It was kids at risk for years. It's kids in pain, and that redefinition is very, very important. And the same could apply to an adult. And therefore, we've got to be wise enough to somehow work out what will be the toitzor. if I do act or if I don't act. I know somebody who said to her father, I am what I am today because you never said anything when I used to wear tight tops and a bit short skirts. But you never said anything, she said to her father. And that's why today I love to tell stories of tzaddikim at the Shabbos table. Because you gave me the space and allowed me to develop at my own pace, sorry for the poem, and as a result, the end product is a nachas.
It was one of the Rebbes, I think. It could be one of the Vishnitzer Rebbes, but in English, I don't remember exactly, who they were doing an asifa for some tzedakah, and there was this miser who they tried to get him to give tzedakah, and he just wouldn't give anything. So the Rebbe b'chvoidei ba'atzmo, he went to this person's house. The person said, the Admor Alein is here. Shane, he took him in, and the Rebbe sat there. Didn't say a word. 10 minutes, he sat there and sat there. The poor fellow was like, didn't know what was. The Rebbe came to him out, didn't say anything. Sat there for 10 minutes, shtum, not a word. After 10 minutes, the Rebbe got up and told his Gabba, okay, we can go. And now this fellow was completely going Meshuggah. He said, I understand, the Rebbe came all the way to my house, he sat here and did nothing, and now you're not going. Just tell me why you came. You wanted to see if there was shatnez in the carpet? What did you come for? He says, I wanted to do the mitzvah of loy loy ma dova shaloi nishma. And he took out his checkbook and he wrote a check. I'm all saying nothing. Don't think that they don't hear our not saying anything. When you don't say something, they hear that you're accepting them if you do it right. If you're boiling inside, then sometimes silence is more deafening than anything else. But if you can be loy loy maradova shaloi nishma, sometimes it has a very, very profound impact on the kids. Like Rav Jung said before.
If I may just add to this, I know we have to finish, but the fact that they know how we feel, and yet they realize we must have some good reason for not reacting, that's a message.
Yeah. To give a closing remark is very difficult because this is a sugya that's ongoing. It's not a sugya that closes, but we should all take the chizuk and realize that everything that was said was just basic guidelines, and have somebody to speak to, a chacham who knows the story, who knows you, who knows your child, who's got the time of day to listen to you, to hear you, and b'siyat Ishmaya, you'll see a big tikkun.
Also, Rabbi, a lot of credit goes to all the parents who made the effort to come here. And the reason is, why do they come? Because they want to learn. They want to get it right. And not just do the obvious and be tough and be unbending. And therefore, a lot of credit is due to every mother and father who took the tircha to come for this Shabbos Kodesh. The Eibusher should help. You should very much liach.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.